Okay, so then I guess kind of just, we have a couple of topics for discussion. So we got 6 things that we want to cover. And so the first thing generally is we're talking about adding a SSH recovery shell to the images, which is contentious a little bit because some people have said it's a good idea and other people are honestly scared by it. And so the idea that I've kind of I've thought about, or I've even mocked it up a little bit. I don't have it here to show, but basically what it would do is, in the event that a hard disk failed to mount, it would launch SSH instead of failing to continue to boot. And it would adopt the SSH configuration of the disk, and then would force users into a screen session that said, hey, guess what, your disk is forked. And then in order to clear it, you would reboot your server and continue. Now, for instance stores and anybody, if you're using a ephemeral disk, this is really kind of who cares. But for EBS disk volumes and other clouds, this is kind of a big issue. I guess the question that needs to be asked and answered is this worth doing, and should we even try?
Well, for EBS, it's not really a big deal, right? Because it's not at all important.
Well, it depends on where your data is. Because you can detach, but that also assumes that you're thinking from an Amazon-centric point of view and not from another cloud where maybe you don't have the ability to move to reattach disks.
Well, so for EBS, like for a boot from a removable volume, it's not a big deal. You can get your data. For Instance-store, you shouldn't have been putting the data there, but they liked it.
Well, people still do.
The simple fact is, you did. So.
It would be helpful for troubleshooting purposes. I know that you frequently spend when you forget getting the data, it's just finding out.
Yeah.
What config file did you fat finger when you baked your image? Why can't it do that?
It's certainly useful. I mean, like instances where we have things just freak out also.
The only problem with this is that the thing that won't defend against is if you mess up the kernel. So if you mess up a config file, bad init job, something, I mean, well, it depends. It's only going to cover, there's going to be a lot of edge cases that it won't even work.
And how would we even start with, like, how would we select the recovery shell? Because my experience with EC2 is that when we boot it, like, can you send information to it when you reboot?
No.
I think you're saying like in like a worst case failure,
it would detect the failure.
Yeah, go into that. And
The case where this occurs is when, and then there's a bug open for this, but basically if you've ever booted your laptop and it says, press S to skip or C to check, it does that on Cloud Image too.
Yeah.
And it sits there waiting for somebody to press S or C, and you're done.
So Ben, what advantage does this give to people who go follow the mantra, plan for failure?
Nothing.
And that's the sort of hyperscale stuff we're pushing for, right?
Yes.
So it sounds like a really whizzy feature, but is it, I mean, what's the real benefit? I mean, people should be using the cloud with failure in mind, right?
I think, to be honest, I'm torn on this feature. Because I see your point, but we have a lot of our users who are running 1 or 2 instances in the cloud. They're just learning the cloud, and the cloud seems like a harsh environment. But then when you start going up to hyperscale, where your EBS is dead, who cares? You throw it away and start over again, or because it's not worth your time. And so, but then you also have people who are running databases. So even at hyperscale, you're still going to be running databases somewhere. And if you aren't doing full replication or something like that, maybe just a big MySQL database, then this feature becomes nice.
I mean, if this was such a major issue, wouldn't you have expected the major cloud providers to have already implemented Zero Console?
That's a good question.
Major problem.
That has been a very frequent request for Amazon for years. It has, very frequent.
Yeah.
I mean,
Not saying I support this, but.
so honestly, like for me, the use case is not let me recover my data. Like where I repeatedly find like I wish I had this, since I'm making a new image, I'm doing something new and crafty, it doesn't work, I want to figure out why. And I can't, because all I've got is whatever error showed up on the console. Even if I've got even that. So like some way to.
If an error doesn't show up on the console, will this help? Wouldn't this?
It probably does, but I'm saying to get a sense of what, to kind of get an idea of what's going on there. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't had access to this, so I haven't tried. So I haven't been watching solve my problems. I just know, like in a physical infrastructure, that's the first thing I do.
So if an EBS boot image doesn't boot,
Right.
you can always take that disk, attach it to another image, and look at what went wrong and fix it.
Instance-store, it's very hard stuff.
What's the issue?
I mean, you're talking about EBS, and actually our use case is that we don't use EBS, so it's something completely different. It sounds
What's
So
the
you don't
issue?
mind losing the instance.
So do you
No, like I said, I couldn't care less.
No, if you're using Instance-store though.
Yeah.
What's the issue about this mechanism? It will be authenticated using the same SSH key or not?
Yes, it would basically use the same SSH configuration that's currently available.
So what's the security issue of having this recovery show?
It's a behavior change.
So one of the questions I like to ask is, if it's good for EC2 and other cloud providers, why isn't it good for servers in the general case? Can you justify this as a server change?
I did actually raise this about 2 or 3 years ago about us doing that.
And if general server is rejected, then I think it should be rejected by EC2. But if general server accepts it, then
First of all,
I just think it should behave the same.
First of all, you've got
Ubuntu server.
on a physical server, you have the possibility to change your booting parameter to go to a secure shell. That's already the case. If I have physical access to a server, I can even bypass root.
I have physical access, but it's 30 minutes away through a security thing and parking, and then I have to go downstairs and open up my cabinet and find the server. Yeah, physical access, but it's a Ubuntu server running in a rack somewhere. Why wouldn't I have the same kind of access needs as on EC2?
Because with physical hardware, it's easier to have serial console and IPKVM, whereas the major cloud providers don't yet support out-of-band control.
I mean, what is the actual, like, I mean, so, again, I agree with your point that it's good for virtual, and it's probably good enough for, real stuff also. But the one thing that I'm trying to figure out is how is this different from what happens today? So, like, you bring up the network, and you bring up the SSHD, and pretty shortly after that, what would be, like, what's the actual change? Like,
The actual change is that if, depending on disk configuration, or so let's take the case that your spare EBS volume that you have attached doesn't mount, and and then basically this sits there hanging because you've configured it so that if it fails on boot and just basically sits there and says you have problems with your disk, hit Control D or whatever, continue. So it's basically taking that prompt and exposing it over SSH.
And I can certainly see you doing that. I think in our particular case that we're referring to, I don't think it's a difference. Because it sounds like the main issue is like when an EBS volume stops the system from booting and we don't use EBS.
Well, yeah, the issue, the place for this is the case, because if it was an EBS volume, probably actually just detach the thing and reboot the system, and then it wouldn't see that disk and worry about it, right? But if it's ephemeral and it was there and it was going to check it, you can get it back. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean,
I honestly think that 3 years ago I thought this was a really good idea, but now I think a large portion of the population is more educated to how they should be using this, and it's kind of a lot less valuable. There also is a feature or backdoor, how you care to see it in the images, where if you attach a disk that is labeled, has a file system labeled rescue on it, in the ramfs, will see it and go to it. The point of this was so that if you got into this hung case, you could attach a disk with the boot,
Right.
and reboot the instance remotely, and it would come in, boot off of your rescue label, and then you can.
That seems good enough to me, that existed. I mean, that seems like,
Nobody ever blogged about it or wrote any documentation about it.
maybe that doesn't need to happen. I mean, it seems like the way that you would normally want to use this.
Basically booting off of a thumb drive.
Yeah, but like an EBS of a thumb drive
Yeah.
or something. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, do you have an image that would work from, or is this just a matter of like extracting the ambient?
Basically, the reason I never documented it because it wasn't just straightforward, but the very easy way to do it is take an existing cloud image, boot it, shut it down, change its volume label, and attach that.
So maybe the real answer is to this, which would probably make a lot more people comfortable, including myself, is we publish an AMI, a rescue AMI in each region that has it set, and then we just make the snapshot public.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
That's kind of where I was.
How does this work for people that publishes appliances and don't want to provide root access?
Sucks for them.
Because that was one of the cases that was brought up on the mailing list.
I mean,
And you raised that point.
if they want to change that, can't they change the script that?
Yeah.
Can we provide a way to change the behavior? A flag somewhere that says,
So-
don't do that.
So,
I think there's probably in that, if there's not, I would add a configuration. I very likely did put something in there to disable it. You can also just remove the cloud -rescue package, and then it would not do that.
So it should be documented.
It should be documented, yes.
so is the consensus then, so we don't run out of time since we got a lot more to
Yeah.
cover, does that seem like a palatable way to go forward, and is that what we should do?
If there's a pre-baked image that I can just connect to it through EBS or something, that would be good enough. I mean, I think that in our case, it's like it'd be very rare for us. It would be nice to have, but it's not something that we would use often enough, I don't think, to change the flow.
The other reason I didn't blog about it is like because if you if your system was like really screwed up, like /sbin and it was just not there, I couldn't get the attach to happen right. Like Zen, to me, it shouldn't have done it like this, but Zen was like waiting for the response from the guest to say it's attached, and so it wasn't, my reboots weren't working or something like that. It's not like it was a physical plug something in.
So there are cases where this doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be the case in almost every
Yeah.
recovery option, even in a non-cloud world. There's always a level of screwed up in this that you're just like, you can't recover from it, you can't get into your system.
Yeah, I mean, this is the moral equivalent.
Yeah.
Fucked my machine so bad that smart gets us to come in and install.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll publish a rescue snapshot and look at some documentation and see what people think of it. I'll look at the mailing list because definitely I don't want this to turn into another mistake that we made last cycle. So
Since it's a rescue snapshot, would you be able, and especially since EC2 now supports 32-bit images, or 64-bit images everywhere, you just publish like one rescue just to make it easy? That way you don't.
we would need a 32 and we need a 64 because of the user land. Because if you try to do a true in, you need to match the fitness on this.
And there's other providers.
Fair enough.
Because you can use a 32-bit under, you can use,
I
yeah.
was talking about for the AMI. I was talking about for the AMI IDs, but yeah, you make a penthouse point.
So,
You can use a
even the
32-bit user land just fine with a 64-bit kernel.
Yes, but you can't use a 60, you can't, yeah, you're right.
That's
Yeah,
no
so it could
problem.
be 64-bit all around, right?
No, because the kernel comes off of the root file system if it's not there. But pbgrub loads in the manifest, loads a kernel.
Oh,
and the
that's
kernel
right.
can't then.
Well, it's a rescue control. We're using the netramfs and
No, you can't do that. I mean, pbgrub is what loads the thing, right? So pbgrub has to find an initramfs and a kernel, and it boots it, and then that initramfs and kernel would be 32-bit, and we'd be looking for than to try to.
There is no K, is that right?
Doesn't work good, but even then, I don't even know if you can cage that. Can do a 64-bit kernel from a 32-bit. I don't know, but one way or another.
Okay,
It's
so
not perfect.
So look to the mailing list for that. Multiple locale support. This has been a question that's come up, and the question is, how many people are hitting issues related to multiple, having the wrong locale on your client? So Mr. Barcet, because he speaks French. And Dave, the one who's complaining about this doesn't even show up.
It's a little bit of an issue for Macs as well, where you might have the possibility of a real physical keyboard. If you happen to have a UK keyboard, your pound sign gets in the way of the number sign and things like that.
That's not locale, that's keyboard selection, but yeah, for the images stuff. But this is an issue.
It's only physical.
Yeah.
You said that multiple locales support, you can't just change the default locale for the next boot or something?
Well, we can. In fact, in Precise, we introduced a message to let people know that their locale is currently unsupported. And so if you haven't seen it, then you're probably using a US keyboard. I don't think, have you seen that message? With Precise locale.
No, but I haven't, I must say that I haven't did precise images yet.
Okay.
But you should get a nice friendly message that says, here's how you can support your silly French language.
Doesn't seem fair.
So much to say about silly English.
So the idea would be to either install more language packs or come up with a way to dynamically compile the locale on login. So in the case of Nick's case, he'd log in and it would see that he's running fr_fr, and it would then say, okay, this is missing, and attempt to compile it.
Please don't do that. So please don't install packages on login.
No, it wouldn't be an auto install. It would just be an install locale. You'd still need to install. The problem where this doesn't really become all that useful is that the language pack isn't installed.
Right. That's please don't uninstall packages. That's something logged in.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure I'd like that. Because if I really care about it, what I have to do is quite simple. Well, it's simple and it's not. It is simple once you figure out the command to do it.
And that's the change we did do in Precise, is we're telling people how to do it now.
You can copy and paste it.
And I can do that in the next time I launch an instance. I have this snippet in CloudRescue and I don't care about it anymore.
Well, not only that, we got the snippet for clouding it, but we also put on the screen how to generate the locale and how to install the language pack. And if you decide to, you're exporting LC_all equals foo, will tell you that that doesn't even exist. So we do some heuristics to say that the language is either not supported or not installed.
So I think that should be enough. I don't see why we want to go further.
Okay.
I mean, one thing you could consider doing is like providing like a template user script or something. People want to install French.
No, well, that's what it does.
In the cloud config, there's actually a locale setting that you can set, and then you don't make the right decisions.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay. So the removal of console kit daemon, this was proposed by a community member. I looked, and as near as I can tell, it's not even imprecise. So I don't think this is an issue anymore. Okay. All right. So improving methods for users to find the official EC2 AMIs. Every now and then that kind of comes up, and the question is, are people still having a hard time finding the official AMIs?
Yes.
Okay. Talk to it.
I just listed a few places that they're shown right now. The one that I usually end up with is the first one when I'm searching. I don't know what and that gives you, I don't know if there's any way to bring it up, that gives you a super long list of every possible AMI with all the different releases, and then you can search using keywords. But the keywords don't always work, so if I'm looking for
Are you talking about cloud.ubuntu.com/EMI?
Yes.
I didn't, well,
Please don't double it.
I know every time I search, it just ends up on your website.
Yeah. But I think that Ubuntu as a project should have.
I
How
agree.
much easier.
That's sort of the.
So, what's the issue on this?
So the issue on this is, hey, I want to run Ubuntu on EC2. I'm a new user. Hey, welcome here. Now what do I do? They have absolutely no clue.
Okay.
It's
So
overwhelming.
should the default list only show the latest?
I think we should show, just like you go to the standard Ubuntu.com and it says, hey, I want to run Ubuntu. Here it is. And there's like two options, right? It's like the LTS and or you want. And it's by default 32 bits, and oh, you want to run 64, that's separate. Oh, you want to use torrent download, it's like all hidden.
Oh, so checkbox driven interface.
So at the top, you just say, here it is. You get precise on 64-bit. You don't need to present 32 bits. You don't need to present.
Maybe you select a region, yeah.
We don't need to show Instance-store. It's just give them EBS to start with. It's very, very simple. Here's the ID and
Go. User select a region.
Let's tabulate.
do you want more stuff, more options? Okay, show more options.
UI
Pick up.
simplification, UX simplification.
if you actually, just go to that.
Let's do some UX work on
I mean,
that.
I guess.
Basically, you need to pick a region, that's it.
Would it
A
be
region,
sufficient?
that's.
Would it be
Yeah, that's
sufficient
all.
if in that, just type
How do we need this
type
work?
precise AMD64 EBS? If it just started out like that?
That's still showing me too much, right?
That's a lot of.
Oh, that's just regions?
That's one per region. There's 7 regions now.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah, that's good.
But we could have something a little bit more user friendly.
I mean, like a map or something where you click on that and you get kind of.
Yeah, those are actually clickable, right?
Yeah.
You can click on the Omni ID.
I didn't just know. I just know like the first time I don't think it was definitely wasn't easy on that. But you
I didn't know about the page, I always just look at the
Let's-
pieces, precise release thing, and just search.
Let's
on
have an
it.
action item, work on the UI. We have some good UX people now.
Yeah.
And actually cloud.ubuntu.com might be integrated in ubuntu.com/cloud as part of the redesign of the website. So
Yeah.
you might want to do some work there.
And make the clicking, start, make the button that actually goes start this, in the sense of this type. That goes to it switches to the console and let's keep going through. If they haven't registered for an account, it'll ask to register. Everything.
That's what it does right now. It goes to console.
But you see that, why should I click on AMI-A29943CP? As a user, I don't click on that.
Yeah, the big button that says most
Another point is, once that UI is defined, it's very clear, there should be, that should be the place where everybody else is sent. So right now, there are other places you can find IDs, but they don't all link to each other, or they don't link to the one place it's recommended, so.
Interesting.
Identify a good starting point and send people there.
So realistically, the kind of the concern, distilling the concern is we should have one authoritative place and reference everybody to go there.
Figure out how easy for somebody to start an EC2 instance. Implement that design, and then make everything go there.
I mean, when you look at try.cloud.ubuntu.com, there we've done some work, and you get access to an instance in 5 steps. I guess we should get to the same level for a real instance.
CloudRescue, then click on Ubuntu and on EC2. That comes back here.
Try.cloud.ubuntu.com.
Oh.
Yeah, this is actually a really nice interface.
And I think we could have something as simple as a default and have advanced checkbox and get to the searchable list.
Yeah.
And have a real simple one that says give me an image and then.
It might not even be necessary to feature all of the regions.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to talk with the UI people, but just, promote US East 1.
All right.
And then make the other ones a smaller option underneath, but make it really clear. So click, 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 I want the EC2 console.
We've
They're running
enough UX people that can go with it.
Now the other method, since we want to make sure we have enough time to finish everything, Since we got the, what about the other methods of finding the images? Do you use them, or are they just not relevant, or are they confusing?
It's like the directory tree.
Yep.
It's fine to be around. The query, extremely valuable.
And what about the new query too? Besides the fact that it's JSON.
I probably would have used that if I had the available when I started.
Yeah, because I'll show it to you after. We got query 2, which is JSON formatted and describes all the images.
Yeah, those are all valuable for people who are
developers.
Yeah, interested in want to find them. Yeah, they should be available, but not pushed in front of the average user.
Yep.
Which people are right now are sent to. If you go to cloud-images.ubuntu.com,
Where is this?
you get a directory listing of query, query 2, releases, server, precise. I'm not sure which of these I should be clicking on to find what I want to run.
Fair enough. All right. For those interested in this, we'll talk about it after. Next one is full disk images for older releases. This has a the main reason for this is for people running on KVM or who want to, for whatever reason, use them on Zen, HVM locally, whatever. OpenStack, other clouds. It has some value. We generally have not made changes to older release images, but with OpenStack, people are going to want the option to have a self-contained disk with a bootloader and a kernel. Is basically what we're saying. So it wasn't until Natty that was in there.
I think we have, on here has this one's.
Yeah, so anybody before, so Natty and Lucid, currently, if you download their disk images, they require you to upload the kernel and the initramfs or to the cloud to be able to use them. But with American later, you get a full disk image, which is bootable.
So you want to backport
that feature.
I mean, people who are already using those images, I would think they've already gone through the effort of doing what they need to do. Why would you bother?
New clouds.
Huh?
The new clouds. People, if you decide that you want to run Lucid in your OpenStack cloud in your garage, right now you got to go through the development of doing that.
It seems to me that you want to encourage new stuff. I guess I can see the value there somewhat, but it seems like that takes away things that would be better served. Like this just seems like if you've been using EC2 and using 10.04, it's time to upgrade. If you want to run OpenStack, it seems like. I think that would be.
Well, this isn't
better. Maybe
We support Lucid for another 3 years, so
Yeah.
it would be useful to have that in OpenStack.
So I mean,
The real reason that I put this up there is that on our OpenStack installs, I have to do the kernel and initramfs and image path, and you can't reboot into a new kernel. You reboot and it goes back into the old kernel. Right?
I mean, I'm sure that it would be useful. All I'm saying, and maybe there's a fantastic. I mean, it sounds like there are good reasons to do it. I'm not trying to say that it shouldn't be done. I'm just saying, like, it seems like the people who have gone through the effort of getting this working, but now, I mean, they would have the option of updating it, but would they?
Well, I think that's kind of tangent, tangent based on what we're talking about, because enabling, making it easier for our cloud users. I mean, because right now, like Scott was saying, you're stuck on that kernel. So this actually gives them the ability to receive updates a whole lot easier.
Well, that's why I said it sounds like there are good reasons. I mean, also, since you guys are supporting the versions that don't have that functionality, if indeed you support them in that way, then you should definitely make it easier for users. So it'll just simplify your lives, right?
So I'm not hearing any major objections there.
Yeah, we should turn that off for 10.04.
Especially if it's simple.
All right, disable the 5-second boot on boot menu by default. Realistically, in the cloud, there's no reason for us to have that.
You can't inject into that anything. Like you can't input into that anything.
Nope.
Well, not on. So the place that this would take path is on OpenStack, and right now it basically just waits for 5 seconds and waits time.
Also on the HDM images,
But
VM.
yeah.
So we'll be able to use the same image on the. Maybe you should leave it in then. I mean, 5 seconds out of a 5 minute.
It's not a 5 minute boot.
Oh,
This is about 2 minutes fast.
oh, right.
It should be up to functional and, yeah.
I mean,
Force is take a while.
I mean, the reboots should be fairly infrequent.
The only reason I did this is because in order to make a lucid image do something, like use the no cloud or something, like not boot usably outside of the cloud with no metadata service, you had to change the command line. And so if you don't show it at all, there was no way it was just going to go right into the stupid waiting for metadata service path. But now, if you want to do that, you can attach a disk and Cloud Init will see it and say, oh, I don't need metadata service, you give me this. And so it boots locally. There was no other way at that point to indicate, hey, I'd like to do something else.
Right. I mean, but your other point remains that like OpenStack, you might have access to.
You probably don't have access to the console, and even if you do, it would be only on the first boot that you would be unable. This is all for first boot, right?
Oh,
Because
okay.
after that, you can change your config file yourself, right?
It's true. I mean, how long if it's only for the first boot, that's one time in the lifetime of the server. I mean,
Most
Because
servers only ever boot out the first time
Yeah.
for my usage of the cloud.
and in my usage of the cloud, I booted an instance and it's up for 20 minutes, and I wanted to use it now. And so 5 seconds out of 14 is significant. Like, before it's usable, that's why I think it should digit.
I actually like the idea of shaving time off. I just don't, and you're right, you can just edit it. And I guess you can just cut another image if you want to have that built in, so.
I think we should probably just stick with that.
In most common cases, almost surely going to be not doing anything with it, so I think it makes perfect sense.
Okay. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left. What are some of the concerns from the community?
So I was messing around with building images the other day, and one of the things that I found really frustrating about the user scripts was that the user script itself runs before the other cloud init things. So, like, for example, if I have a user init, whatever they're called, user init script, whatever they're called, it will actually run that script, and then it goes through and tries to do all of the Ubuntu SSH authorized, whatever the other cloud init things are. And if I do anything to monkey with my SSH keys beforehand, it kind of gets
Probably gave it.
tweaked in the wrong
Are
way.
you talking about user data?
User data, yes.
Are you starting with the shebang, or are you starting with
Yeah, you probably made it get
Sure.
executed as a boot hook and not as a. User data should basically run. If you just spit something with pound bang at the beginning, it should execute that at RC local. I mean, like pretty much the last thing that happens in boot.
So
If it didn't, then that needs to be fixed.
So what was? I'd have to log in one of our instances to see exactly what it was doing again, but it was definitely executing the user data script before the other bits of cloud. So, and I think that I looked at it, and it looked like it was due to the ordering and upserve. Right? Like it looked like they were all. It looked like they might have started in parallel, but just that because it started monkeying things, maybe.
If you can recreate that, then open a bug and you can point me at it.
Okay.
It's not desired or expected behavior for sure.
Yeah, and it's not, and we run a lot of
But
stuff.
there are ways
like
like user
that.
data to tell it to run really
To
early.
tell it to run
So
really
if you're telling it that, then you're doing it wrong. Or what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it started, basically, if your code started with pound boot hook, like if your user data started with pound boot hook, and then the next line had shebang, that basically says, execute this as soon as you possibly can.
Okay.
But-
I mean, that's certainly not what we're doing. So-
Right. I would have thought you were aware of that if it.
Yeah.
But-
So,
Yeah, I mean, you could pick me a knife, Steve, but
Yeah.
like, that's a bug. It will fix that.
Other comments, concerns?
Sort of, I don't know, I mean, we've been running into a lot of instances that can be, running, it seems like to be like a kernel, some sort of kernel lock on a little bit more, on the call different instance types. And speaking with our hands-on support rep, they're saying it's actually like a live sort of thing, that we're just like one.
So this is a bug on the core, or on
Yes.
this kernel?
Yeah, literally it's kernel.
Do we have a bug?
There is, I'm actually just kind of curious, it's a slide spread, so it's going to be, or it's.
Hook up with me afterwards, and we'll discuss this.
Sure.
I'm curious because normally if Amazon's telling me that, they normally tell me about it too. And I haven't heard about it. Okay. All right, so since we got 7 minutes left, let's talk about biodegradable and re-enabling.
On the FSCK, I've seen this. On the FSCK check, is it possible to have FSCK whatever runs and say, oh, there's no console accessible, so don't run it? I don't know how you would check that, or that's something that would be a general.
Yeah.
That'd be a change to the RAM FS.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're right. There would be a place to check. And
Instead of trying to patch it on the after it's wrong.
The problem that I see with that though is that on Amazon and I think with a pair of virtual instances we're using was it HVC 0, which is a valid console, and there is a console. The question is, and you have no way of determining whether or not it's an accessible console.
Right.
And so,
Well, why would you not want to not run it?
Why would
Just
you-
because you're not staring at it? I mean, checking the file system seems like a good idea.
It comes up and says yes or no.
Well, then let's fix that.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of not run FSCK. I mean,
let's face that.
right?
You're right.
so there is an interesting way you could do that.
So run it as a prompt.
Is maybe have an Etsy file, or well, you can't count on that being there. Maybe a boot flag that says that it's in a virtual or a console is not accessible.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then it just continues to boot. But the only problem that I see with that is that it depends on on how you want it to fail. Because generally with the cloud, I think it's better for it to fail and not come up than come up in a bad state. Especially if you're running a database server or web server.
Well,
you
one of
can
the-
serve up
one of the-
corrupt content instead of.
One of the pieces of this comes up though is somebody builds their Omni when somebody does Omni and starts to switch to Amazon, they call it Omni and Amazon, or it was a name line. They're the same thing.
I still call them Omnis.
You must have to Amazon one.
Yeah.
If somebody builds it on me wrong, it has like a flag of this many boots or this many months after it's been created, the file system needs to be checked again. Well, when I'm, it's been 6 months since the file systems are checked, but it's it's the same file system. It's guaranteed that the disk didn't go bad in the last 6 months because I just created it as a copy. So at that point, every single time you boot that on me,
Actually, we create ours with that timeout in place.
still in place.
Yes. Because I looked to disable that, and I talked to some people, and they're like, well, why do you want to disable it? Because you don't want it to run if 6 months down the road it's pristine, right? But that run, that initial run, if it's perfect, takes a quarter of a second.
Okay. I thought it was good.
Your world of seeing an FSCK is when basically you had a lot of stuff to do. So I left it on because if you disable it, and actually in OpenStack, there's code that actually disables it on people's file systems. All you're asking for is there's a reason you were running it, and there was a reason the file system
You wanted
developer wanted you to run it.
that long.
Yes.
But I was thinking with the.
Right.
Okay.
So we left it turned on. So ours are broken in that sense.
Good to know. I'll have to add mine back in.
Okay. Other comments? If not, feel free to send out to the relevant emailing list any thoughts or ideas, and if we need to have another one, we'll have another one. But definitely, I want to get some feedback on these images, and whether that's scornful hate mail, it's still feedback. So
Yeah.
please provide feedback.
Absolutely. If you have comments about our stuff, then please raise them. If it doesn't just work for you, then we want to know about it.
And particular use case that I'm interested in is when I talk to people who use Ubuntu in the cloud and they don't use our official images. I'd like to know the reason why. Because it usually means that maybe we aren't covering your use case, maybe your use case isn't good, appropriate for the cloud images, but want to make sure that we're providing the best value for our users. And so send us a mail and say, hey, why aren't you doing this, or you're doing this wrong? And especially kick the tires on these on our development releases, so that we can make changes before we have problems. We don't want to recreate some of the fiasco that we had this last cycle.
Does that include like using your images and customizing them? You want to know why you
Yes.
do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there like a launchpad project or a mailing list or some type of?
Yeah, we had Ubuntu Cloud, that was Ubuntu.com, and there's also EC2 on Ubuntu, which is run by Mr. Hammond.
Ubuntu Cloud or something?
And then also the announcement list.
Yep, and then we had Ubuntu
So here's
Cloud.
precisely what I ran into.
All right, so thank you, gentlemen.
I should,